On this episode of AV Week, we talk about where acoustical transparent screens fit into commercial AV, Millennials, Boomers, and Generation X, and what is InfoComm's Tide, and why should you go? All that and more, next on AV Week.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is AV Week, episode 294, recorded Friday, April 14th, 2017. Audio as an afterthought. AV Week is brought to you by our fine group of underwriters, companies like FSR, and by Vadio, a leading manufacturer of professional PTZ cameras, Pro AV solutions, and UCC integration systems. This is AV Week, your weekly wrap-up of audio-visual news and information. My name is Tim Albright. I am your host. With us to talk about that very thing, the news and information of the week, first and foremost, Mr. Brock McGinnis from Westbury National. Welcome, sir.
Hello, Tim. I am coming to you today from a hotel room in a suburb of Montreal, Vaudreuil-Dorion. And so don't mind the backdrop, please. I don't have my usual stuffed dinosaur.
Do you have to speak French today? Is that the... Never mind. That was a bad Canadian Quebec joke.
I do not.
Excellent, because it's been a long time since I took French. Also with us is Mr. Tom LeBlanc from Commercial Integrator. How are you, sir?
Good, Tim. I'm also in a hotel room. I just travel with covers of Commercial Integrator.
Yeah, if you're not watching the video, Tom is in his office, which he has every issue of Commercial Integrator, and if you look closely, you can see Mr. McInnes on one of those. So can't see my face, even though I was on the 40 under 40. Anyhow, last but not least, Rachel Bradshaw from InfoComm International. How are you, ma'am?
I'm wonderful. Thanks for having me on, Tim. I'm here at InfoComm Ground Zero getting ready for the show.
In beautiful Fairfax, Virginia. 2 months, actually, because today we are recording this on April 14th, 2 months from right now. We will all, be on the show floor in Orlando somewhere, I'm certain.
I sure hope so.
Yeah, we will be. All right, first and foremost, this comes to us from our friends over at AV Network. Screen Innovations is done something kind of interesting, and they're releasing, or they're announcing, I guess I should say, their acoustically transparent ALR models. They're calling them acoustically transparent screens. They're AT line. The screens have according to the article, over 28,000 perforated 55 millimeter holes. Those holes allow for the sound to come through. According to the folks, it has a 3 decibel reduction at 1 kilohertz, a 6 decibel attenuation at 20 kilohertz. According to Tom Nugent from SI, the difference is easily corrected by most modern receivers with room correction, meaning you can overcome the 3 and the 6 decibel attenuation. Brock, first question is going to come to you here. SI is starting to work their way into the commercial market. Why do acoustically transparent screens matter in this market, or do they?
At the 106-inch level, that is either for a home theater or it's for a boardroom where they want to hide the speakers behind a projection screen. We love SI. We think they make great product. Perforated product is not new. This is something we've been buying, particularly from Stewart Film Screen, for a long time for larger venue applications. But SI's particular brand of light rejection, edgeless screens for high-end boardroom and presentation applications. It's great. Video needs audio.
Video needs audio, and sometimes you're right. Sometimes you want to hide the speakers there. Tom, from your standpoint, how does this change the design of the system, the overall look of the system, by hiding, like Mark said, by hiding the speakers?
Well, I mean, I think it's a good product, and I don't know, I shouldn't comment on the product. I don't know everything about the product. You described the
basic specs.
Yeah. So looking at that, it's interesting, and it speaks to a trend, which is that, when these integration firms are selling technology for meeting rooms or a large conference room or something like that, they're no longer generally talking to somebody who's going to be kind of like wowed about speakers or wowed about audio. They're more likely talking to somebody who might not even remember that audio needs to be a consideration in that room. And they're likely talking to somebody who is likely to not want to see speakers on the wall. So I think it's a good, it's a good solution for that conundrum for integrators who are dealing with people who, A, audio is an afterthought, and B, it's not something they want to see in the room. I think that most customers nowadays in meeting rooms or boardrooms, I don't think they see like the hardware as like a point of pride in the room. And I think that, that is sometimes hard for integrators to wrap their heads around. But this is a good solution for that, because now, you don't have to sacrifice audio and you don't have to sacrifice the aesthetics. It's a nice solution for the market today.
All right, Rachel, over the last few years, InfoComm, at least the show, has gotten more and more end users to the show floor. Is Tom right where these folks are thinking of audio as an afterthought? So a solution like this makes a whole lot of sense? Or the folks that you guys are talking to, are they more apt to care about the speakers at least, or do they not want to see the speakers, I guess is the best way to ask that.
All end users are a special snowflake. There are always going to be end users who view audio very passionately, but I do think that by and large it's true that people want and almost expect a certain degree of magic in their systems these days for the use of their technology to be so natural, so seamless, so integrated into the environment that it just seems to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. And that move towards an aesthetic where things are hidden or incorporated into furniture or wallpaper thin screens is all part of that desire for sort of a magical, holistic technology is just sort of oozing out of the walls effortlessly expectation that is becoming more and more commonplace among end users.
So it's just there, just kind of like your cell phone just works.
Yeah, it's like breathing.
So, yeah, just like breathing, and Brock is the one who makes the breathing possible. So
right, you're producing the oxygen for us.
Exactly. Did you hear that, McInnes? You're producing oxygen.
Somebody's got to do it.
All right. Speaking of Mr. McGinnis, Commercial Integrator gave us a very wonderful. Mr. McGinnis gave us a very wonderful article through Commercial Integrator. Brock, I'm going to end with you on this, but feel free to jump in if we misrepresent or misread your article. How about that? The title of the article, which was produced by Mr. LeBlanc, actually, he produced the title. The problem isn't with millennials; it's with old people in the workplace. Quote unquote. It's not me saying that. The way I read it, Brock, is that Brock recognizes the positions of older AV employees, but certainly says that we need to embrace the next generation as they kind of come up. And I'm going to take a quote from his quote unquote. The entitled, meaning the older generation who have worked to the position they are, hate teaching because doing is faster and easier. We hate delegating because we hate trusting. And most of all, we hate young people, especially brilliant, ambitious, energetic, creative, tech-savvy young people who have amazing AV careers ahead of them, just like we did once back in the day. So, interesting that we picked this article for this week, and I actually had a conversation with some Generation Yers yesterday. Tom, first and foremost, how do we solve this? How do we get the folks who are towards the latter half or the second half of their career to embrace the young people coming up?
Well, that's going to be a big challenge, right? I mean, just based purely off of the reaction to Brock's column, there's a lot of emotion around this issue. And I want to talk a little bit about the column because it's a good column, right? And when Brock submitted it, the headline that he submitted it with was "The Problem with Old People." Now, if somebody really thought there was a problem with old people, that would be kind of a crazy thing to put in a headline. I don't think Brock is a crazy person. Do you?
There are days.
All right. But it's tongue in cheek right from the beginning, right from the moment that he writes that headline that he proposes for the article. The article talks about the workplace labor challenge that we've all been talking about and writing about for a long time, which is that, usually we're talking about it's hard to get millennials into this industry. They don't know that the industry exists. There are some challenges related to that. So Brock framed a very different argument in his column, which is that it's not so much a challenge about getting millennials into the industry. The challenge is that in some cases, there are people clogging up the industry from the other end. There are people that aren't productive and they're not willing to embrace new strategies and new personnel and not willing to weave that into their companies and into the marketplace. I think to say that old people do that is not true and not what he's trying to say. I think what he's saying is, just as there are examples of people who act a certain way in other generations, there are examples of people that act this negative way in the older generation that's in the workforce. When I edited the article, I thought it was important to take Brock's argument and frame it against the common argument, the almost default argument in the industry that the problem relates to not having more millennials. That's why I wove the millennial reference into the headline and also into a subhead. When people comment on Brock's column, they seem to be commenting on something that's going on in their head, not the words on the screen.
Voices.
And it's really interesting to me.
Okay, so here's the thing. I would actually disagree with you and this is the reason why. I think that every generation, and feel free to any of you to disagree with me on this. Every generation does this. I think every older generation, as the generation reaches retirement and starts retiring, and we're in the middle of the boomers retiring, holds on for as long as possible, at least, and maybe not, in years gone by, but let's be kind of honest here. We've only had really kind of 100 years of really good, a system where folks are living long enough to live long enough to retire at a certain age and enjoy it afterwards. The boomers are a unique animal, culturally, as a generation. But they've sure held on for an awful long time. And the reason I mentioned the fact that my conversation yesterday was with a bunch of Gen Yers, I made the comment to them that I honestly don't believe that Generation X, which is mine and actually Tom's generation, are going to get much of a shot at any sort of significant leadership and significant influence, simply because we're too small, right? Generation X is considerably smaller than both the boomers and Generation Y, both very large population-wise generations, talented folks in both generations. And so what I see is the boomers holding on for, oh my God, so long, to the point to where they probably can't do it or shouldn't do it anymore. And then when it does come time for them to start passing the baton will be passed right over Generation X and straight to Generation Y, which is fine. We'll sit back and listen to our Nirvana CDs and stuff. So, Rachel, from your standpoint, Rachel is a Generation Wire. How would you solve this problem? How would you get into the heads of the boomers and say, look, guys, we're just like you. We are where you were 30, 40 years ago?
Well, I think the part of the problem is that we're not, though.
Okay.
I think that I think about, there's this wonderful Alice Waters short story called Everyday Use that's about a woman who's made this quilt and she's passing it down to one of her daughters, and one daughter wants to use it as like a bedspread for everyday use, the way that it's always been used, and the other one wants to hang it on the wall. And from the gaze of the story, we're supposed to sympathize with the daughter who wants to use the quilt as the mother intended, for everyday use. But I think when you think about the millennials and Generation Yers that are entering the workforce and the kind of resentment that they sometimes engender, that we sometimes engender, it's because we're that other daughter who wants to use the thing that our forebears have built in a completely different, unexpected way, in a way that maybe our forebears didn't envision or specifically envisioned against, right? And this is a generation that has gone on the record as valuing things like training in the workplace or opportunities to collaborate and be creative over things like more traditional benefits or compensation. And that comes with a lot of pluses in terms of creativity, but it also comes with a lot of uncertainty in terms of how they can be disruptive to the marketplace, or how they might abandon values that were really, really important to previous generations in the industry. So, like we were talking about earlier, like people not caring about audio as much and being more focused on the visual. That may seem to some like an abandonment of the values of quality that have always been a hallmark of this industry, but it's just a different and changing perspective. So I think the challenge to all of us, generations boomer through millennial, is being open-minded to one another's values and trying to develop new approaches through those combined values instead of just being suspicious about each other's differences.
I want to point out that she said boomer through millennial. Totally skipped up Generation X.
It was meant to be a bracket.
I know.
A bracket
I know.
encompassing.
It was there. All right, Mr. McInnes, wrap this whole thing up for us. What exactly were you thinking in your... That came out wrong. What was your intent when you wrote this article, sir?
I didn't write it to any generation, and I did not write it about any generation. I wrote it about the audiovisual industry. The audiovisual industry has been whining and wailing, and there's gnashing of teeth about not having enough young people, and that's not generation specific. But InfoComm has has a program. NSCA has a program. Everybody's worried that we're not. Why aren't young people lining up at our doors? We've got all this cool technology, and they don't seem to know about us, and they're just tearing of hair and a little self-flagellation. And from my perspective, and this comes from within companies I know well, including our own, we're not opening the door very wide for young people to come and join us. The entry-level positions at our company are typically manual labor positions, hanging TVs, pulling cable. The positions that we need to fill quickly because we have more work than we have the resources to execute with. And these are programming positions, or engineering positions, or project management positions, or account management positions. It's so hard to start someone at scratch and invest time and money in them, to train them. So we take a lazy approach. We take an expedient approach, and we hire somebody who's got 10 or 15 years of experience. But the only reason they're available to hire is that they weren't very good at their jobs in the first place. And so as an industry, we are recycling folks. I meet someone on the floor at InfoComm, and the first thing I ask is, so who are you with now? And that's at the manufacturer level. That's at a lot. At the integrator level too, because folks move around a lot in our industry. And if they were happy or successful in the position they had last year, chances are they wouldn't be in a new one this year. So I think before we complain about some external boogeyman force, that we're not suited for millennials, or millennials aren't suited for us, or something generic and ridiculous like that, that we kind of have to look at our practices. The actual point of the article, to me, was our industry needs to invest more time and effort and energy in developing talent. I think we have a second problem, and I don't know, Tom, if you noticed how I changed from third person to first person at the end of the article. About when I started speaking about the entitled, I said we. Yeah. Because I am one of those people. So this is senior leadership who've been around the industry for a long time, and we've built companies and kind of evolved the industry into, you know, what a millennial will see it as today. We were running things in our 20s and 30s. We were brilliant. We were risk takers. We were decisive. We made huge mistakes. We picked ourselves up, dusted ourselves off, and moved on. Now that we are in our 50s and our 60s, we're reluctant to give those in their 20s and 30s the same chance. We're not trusting. We don't delegate well, and that was the you know, we hate young people at the end. We must hate them, because the kinds of authority and responsibility that we had when we were in our 20s and 30s, we're not naturally passing on to great younger people that we have on our staffs now. We seem to want to stay in a position of having to, you know, having to tick a box to approve an expenditure or approve a hire, approve things in projects that are just everyday parts of the project. And, you know, I jokingly say it's because we don't trust well. Well, it's not a joke. And so until people have authority and responsibility, they don't own their jobs. And if they don't own their jobs, they're not going to be motivated to stay around. And so my generation, and I will generalize at that, we throw darts at millennials for not having any loyalty or not wanting to stay around in a job very long. Well, if I was in my 20s and somebody gave me a job where I had no responsibility and no authority, so therefore I was not part of doing anything of value, I wouldn't stay around very long either. I'd find another place. And people tell me that what millennials value the most within their work life is their team, and the interaction between their team and their ability to actually make a contribution. Well, that's great. Let's give millennials and Ys and X's an opportunity to do that, rather than some of these patriarchal, hierarchical organizations that over time, you know, we have evolved. We were entrepreneurs, and we didn't know how to do anything other than build an AV system. But we built these organizations where now a whole bunch of us at the top of that pyramid, we're sitting there having to, you know, sign off on something that we would have quit if somebody asked us to sign, that, you know, made us sign that. So the article, I obviously did not communicate my point well enough. I will write slower next time.
All right, very good.
One quick shameless
Mm-hmm.
plug.
Yeah.
So there are a couple of organizations in the industry that are really trying to model exactly what I think Brock is talking about, who are trying to change their corporate culture so that they're no longer locked in that cycle of industry poaching, but are instead creating their own homegrown talent. And one of those organizations is AVI Systems, who's worked really hard over the past couple of years to institute an organization-wide recruitment through learning policy. And I just wanted to mention that they're presenting a case study on that effort at this year's InfoComm show as part of our seminar and workshop package. So if you're hearing what Brock is saying and you're sort of shaking your head and thinking, yes, I probably should change what I'm doing, but you don't know where to start, definitely check out what we have at the show on that. We have both the session from AVI Systems on recruiting through learning, and we have a couple of other sessions on how to create a training plan for your people. So we can definitely help you get started with making that cultural change.
And on that note, this is what you call a transition, kids. We'll talk a little bit.
We used to call it a segue.
A segue is it has been appropriated by a little two-wheeled device. The segue, never mind. The Tide Conference at InfoComm, Technology, Innovation, Design, Experience, Tuesday, June 13th. Actually the day before the show starts. The show floor is June 14th to the 16th, but Tide is actually the day before. Rachel, I'm obviously going to start with you on this one. First of all, what is Tide and what's the thinking behind Tide?
Well, Tide is something that's completely different for us, to be honest. And, maybe you don't care. Maybe you're already getting what you need from the show. Thousands of people come to our training programs every year, and they love them. We get great feedback. Tide isn't really for those people. It's for the 35,000 other people who come to the show and for the roughly 6 billion who don't yet. This is a conference that's intended to be a conference that is targeted at people who have maybe progressed beyond technical training in their careers. Like maybe they don't work directly with technology anymore, or maybe they don't really do the tactical planning for their organization anymore, but they're more high-level end users who've maybe don't work directly with specific functions or capabilities of individual boxes, but who are responsible for thinking about how technology can help them achieve business transformation. It's a visionary conference rather than a technical conference. So we're exploring the role of AV technology, how it can be a difference maker with respect to business outcomes. We're looking critically at the industry's identity and hopefully maybe even working to shape it to some extent. And we're examining the larger cultural forces at play that are pulling on the AV industry, which kind of hence the name, Tide. What is happening outside this little microcosm in the industry that's going to pull us in dramatic new directions in future years? And I think it's going to be fairly baller, to be honest. We have a pretty amazing lineup of speakers and talks for this conference.
I would like to point out that she used the term baller, not me. Brock, is this something that makes sense and goes off of our last conversation of getting your folks trained and up to date on stuff?
I don't know what baller means.
Look it up after the show.
I'll guess. All right. So Tide. I went through the registration process on that a little earlier today, or I attempted to. It's complicated to register. I have mixed feelings. I love the fact that InfoComm is attempting something different. I love the fact that InfoComm is using nobody from the industry to be able to provide the content for this event. This is a big thinker thing, and I'm very interested in it. And then I got to the point where it said it was $795 to sit in a ballroom for a day and listen to people I'd never heard of. And I wondered about that value proposition. It's a little expensive for a one-day event, and I'm not sure that I understand what the outcomes that the takeaways I'm going to have as an attendee. Rachel, can you fill any of that in?
Sure, I'd love to. And I will say that, yeah, this is definitely priced differently than the other things that we offer at the show because it is completely different from anything else that we've ever offered at the show. I mean, no other event have we given you the opportunity to talk to people who are on the forefront of the VR movement, who are storytellers from Pixar, who are, some of the top creative and brand agencies in the world. And that's who you're going to have at Tide. This is going to give you access and insight into the business needs driving some of the most valuable brands and organizations in the world, and how AV can play a more critical role in achieving those business needs.
And that is a compelling proposition right there.
That's what it's about.
That is the statement.
All right, Mr. LeBlanc, from your point of view, how valuable and should folks going to InfoComm look at that Tuesday before?
Well, I like the storytelling angle. That's really interesting to me. So, as a reporter covering this industry, I sit through a whole lot of presentations from, manufacturers that are talking about, like a new product line that they might have or something like that. And when I think back on the past year, there's one product presentation that really stands out when I think about it. So it was a company that was talking about, I don't even want to give a clue to what the company is, but basically they make something that is used during a presentation, right? So during the presentation to these press people, myself and a few other press members, they brought in a guy who had absolutely nothing to do with the company, absolutely nothing to do with AV. What he did was he was an expert and an author who focused on the art of the effective speech and presentation. And he talked about things that can really trip people up during a presentation. And it was captivating. It was really interesting to me. And it was different than all the other presentations when it comes to, new product lines that I'd been to in the past year. And it really resonated with me. They didn't even bother to kind of dig into the features and benefits of the particular product, but it was inferred by what they were saying that, technology, as Rachel was saying, plays a big role in storytelling, in effective communication. And it really resonated with me. And I guess, the point in me bringing this up is I think that it's a good topic for the industry. I think the industry could use some work on its ability to tell stories in order to create better narratives when it comes to the value proposition that integration firms offer their customers. And it seems like a great idea.
Yeah, and I think that, we have a lot of different topics that are going to be delved into in Tide. It's a very fast-moving day. One of the breakout options is actually a workshop on the story of the AV industry itself and how we can develop a more compelling, exciting story about who we are as an industry to better present ourselves to our customers. That is going to be one of the concrete takeaways that people will have from this conference. But we're also going to be looking at how AV service providers can learn to become better content creation partners for their customers and help their customers better effectively tell their own stories.
Very cool. All right, guys, that is going to do it for us. Mr. Brock McGinnis from Westbury National, thank you for joining us, sir.
Always a pleasure. And this was a very interesting day on AVWeek.
How do people find you and or Westbury National?
We are at westbury.com. I am on Twitter at Brock McGinnis, and anywhere that good AV stories can be found.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Also with us, Mr. Tom LeBlanc. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Tim.
And how do people find you or Commercial Integrator?
So we pretty recently redesigned commercialintegrator.com, so please check that out.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, it was per Brock's request.
That's funny. He said he made the same request to us, and we had to do the same thing.
Yeah, well, you have to do what he asks.
Absolutely.
He wields the power of the pen.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
But we want to hear both positive and negative reaction to the site. We're still in the tweaking phase, so let us know if you see anything that we should address. And also, Twitter, Com Integrator or LeBlanc Tom.
All right, very good. And Miss Rachel Bradshaw, thank you, ma'am. How do people find you and or InfoComm International?
Definitely come and check out the show website, infocommshow.org. You can find out more about the Tide Conference in particular at infocommshow.org/Tide. I'm not cool enough to tweet, but you can always find me on LinkedIn.
Oh, there are enough InfoCommers tweeting. I can give you some if you want. So Barb and Betsy and
Barb
and
Jason,
Barb. That's a
but
whole other
mostly
thing.
Barb.
Mostly Barb.
Well, and don't forget Noreen and Mr. Grimes. So, my name is Tim Albright. Don't follow me. It's boring on the Twitters, but go by our show site if you would, please. AVNation.tv. AVNation.tv. I wasn't kidding. We followed Commercial Integrators lead and redid our site as well. Still in the tweaking stage as well. So
Pretty slick.
Actually, there's a thank you, sir. There's a button actually that says blame Bradford. Bradford is our web editor, our webmaster. So that's where you send things that are broken, or if you don't like it, send it to him. So we'll put all the stories and links from these fine folks, and then the stories of the links to the stories on this episode's page. If you're listening to this early in the week, I am going to be in Philadelphia with the fine folks at Simco, April 18th in Philly, and April 20th in Maryland, doing a session on IoT. Also, our InfoComm show special section is already up with some stuff. This show will go there as well. We have officially announced our Tweet Up, our annual get-together of AV industry folks. It's free food and drink. Come by and say hi to folks for a couple hours. Wednesday, June 14th from 4 to 6 at the show. And also go, if you're at the website, go in by and see our underwriters if you would, please. They are what make it possible for us to continue to do what we do. So thank you and thank them. So thanks so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. This has been AV Nation and AV Week.